I'm Michelle Makori. This is Kitco News, and we are coming to you from the Vancouver office of mining and media mogul and global philanthropist Frank Giustra. Frank is also the CEO of the Fiore Group. He's the co-chair of the International Crisis Group, as well as the founder of Lionsgate Entertainment. And he is warning us that we are headed towards a bifurcation of the monetary system and a bifurcation of the global workforce. Frank, thank you for hosting us here in your office.
Thanks for coming to Vancouver.
A beautiful city, really
Yes,
spectacular.
Not today, but normally.
I'm not deterred by the weather. I think it's actually very beautiful here. That was an abridged version of your bio, because we have much to discuss, ranging from de-dollarization, commodity-backed currencies, the rising threat of AI, the space-time continuum, quantum gravity, and maybe we'll throw in some olive oil as well into the conversation.
Go for it.
All right. Now, Frank, we spoke early last year, and one of your major forecasts that you made at the time is seemingly materializing, and you highlighted that we're going to see a bifurcation of the global monetary system, with other countries coming up with a reserve currency to challenge the dollar, potentially backed by commodities, including gold, as well as other commodities. And you were, to me, the first person to flag that idea. You highlighted that trend very, very early on. And now it's really gaining momentum and traction. And we're seeing a lot of very rapid developments here. For example, the BRICS are officially, they're meeting in August in Durban, South Africa, to hash out the details of a new world reserve asset. They said they're going ahead and doing this. Brazil and Argentina are in talks to create a common currency. Russia and Iran are eyeing a gold-backed stablecoin. China, of course, long been pushing for the yuan to replace the dollar with a petrodollar, making some headway there with the Saudis. The Economic Community of West Africa is calling for a common currency. They're blaming the US dollar for inflation in the region. So we're seeing a lot of momentum to a trend that you called soon after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and highlighted the US's weaponization of the dollar in response to that. So why don't we start off with you giving us a quick recap of how you got there and what the factors that you saw driving this trend?
Yeah, well, listen, first of all, I started talking about a new monetary system 6 or 7 years ago. But it really
I didn't know you back then.
Well, you didn't know me back then. But, it really has picked up steam since the Ukraine invasion, because that really was the catalyst for everybody to start thinking, especially Russia and China, to start thinking about moving this faster than they would otherwise have moved it. But for me, it's really how I come to these conclusions is really by having a knowledge of history. So you look at historical patterns, you have an understanding of human nature. And then you sit back and observe and just connect the dots. And then you come up with probabilities of what the outcome could be. And to me, I could see where this was heading by the behavior of a lot of countries and regions of the world to de-dollarize first. So finding ways to get around the SWIFT system and get around using the US dollar as a settlement currency. So, everybody's already seen these, this, whether it was China testing cross-border settlements with the digital currency. It's, the BRICS talking about an expansion, them talking about an SDR type of settlement currency. So everybody's talked about those things, and now that those conversations are becoming more and more common. But then the connection to gold was really looking at the clues of how they were behaving. This conversation about the Moscow gold standard. In other words, to take away the LBMA's monopoly on pricing gold, which is very important if you're going to use gold in a currency system. The idea that Saudi Arabia was thinking about moving to settle in yuans in addition to dollars, which would have been heresy 10 years ago. All of these things, what you mentioned, the Iran-Russia conversation about a stablecoin, the golden ruble that was talked about at the beginning of the Ukraine war, all of these things lead me. And then to kind of all wrap it up in a nice bow, you've got very aggressive central bank buying around the world, especially Russia, China, India, now Brazil, and buying physical gold. So the gold's moving from the west to the east at an accelerating pace. Why are they,
Fastest pace in 55 years, I believe.
why are they doing that? So why would they be hoarding this much gold this quickly while these other conversations are taking place about replacing, or not replacing the US dollar, but having a substitute for the US dollar? All of those things, and now look who's buying. The BRICS is looking to expand, and people, you got Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, you got all these countries wanting to join the BRICS expansion. Mm-hmm. What are they doing? They're buying physical gold, all of them, all their central banks. So to me, that just tells me that there's a probability that whatever they come up with, and my best guess is going to be a BRICS type currency, like a basket of currencies backed by gold. You can never in history has a new currency been launched without gold backing at its inception. Eventually they all lose their discipline and they move away from gold, including the US dollar, but they all start with a gold backing. So you have to establish trust with a new currency. If China were to want to make the yuan a respected currency, an international reserve currency, it would have to be backed pretty fully by gold. But I think it's not going to be China. I think it's going to be China and others coming together using gold because it's the easiest thing to use. Gold is money. It's already owned by the central banks. The idea that, about commodity-backed currencies, that's a very complicated, cumbersome, in my opinion, approach to backing a currency. I think it would be too difficult to do. I think gold is easy. It's there.
You don't
it's already
see gold
money.
maybe as just part of the basket of commodities here?
No, I actually see it as
just solely backed with gold.
Partially backed by gold.
Partially backed by gold being the sole commodity in this
equation.
That's
the way I see it. That's the way I see it, because otherwise, why are they buying all this gold?
Maybe.
Oil,
gold and oil.
Yeah, but then that gives a tremendous amount of power to
the climate change.
No, it gives a lot of power to the Saudi Arabias of the world. China doesn't have any oil. How is it going to play a role with China's participation? China has to import all its oil. So I think it's going to be gold, and I believe China's bought most of the gold over the last number of years. They haven't declared it, I don't believe. I think the 2,000 tons declared is just part of it.
Yeah.
And it's stashed in various institutions, and it's there.
They've recently declared that they've made their purchase.
I don't believe that.
But the fact is that if they're saying that much openly, what aren't they telling us?
Exactly. But I'm still curious as to why they declared those small purchases, relatively small, 30 tons in November, 30 tons in December, when they hadn't reported since 2019, when we all know they've bought a lot more gold.
I think that's a shot across the bow.
It might be. I've thought of different scenarios of why they would even declare at this stage. Because I would have thought, if I were China, and you're accumulating gold to get enough to have a gold-backed currency or partially gold-backed currency, that you would be very quiet about it.
Right.
You just don't say anything because you'll drive the price up. Sure. So don't say anything until you're ready to establish what it is you're going to establish. And then you come out and say, by the way, we have 8,000 tons or 5,000 tons or whatever the number is.
So why do you think they did make it?
I don't know. I'm still scratching my head on that one. There was a reason. There had to be a reason, and I don't get it. I would have, if I were in their shoes, I would have kept quiet about it. I don't know.
So here we are now, as the points that you made a while back sort of falling into place. How do you see this playing out in terms of a timeline? How long before this kicks in?
No idea, and I don't think anybody does. I've never been able to predict, and I don't think anybody could. This could take months or years. It could take a decade.
Is it moving faster than you
I think it's moving a lot faster than it would have been had the Ukraine war not started.
Okay.
It is definitely moving faster. The world has seen, so you've got the Russias, the Chinas, the Irans, and the Venezuelas who are either under sanction or threat of sanction if China ever made a move against Taiwan. They have their reason for doing it quickly. But then you've got countries, the BRICS countries, who are looking for a fairer way to settle their trades than using US dollars, and are also afraid of potential sanctions should they do anything that the US doesn't like. And then you have the Global South. And the Global South is being held hostage by an overpriced US dollar. They have to service, they borrow in US dollars, they have to service their debt in US dollars. They're importing inflation because commodities are priced in US dollars. And so they're upset. And you have the IMF screaming to the Fed, to stop raising interest rates. people want to change. 80% of the world's population wants a change. And the U.S. does not want it and will not want it. But how are they going to stop it if the rest of the world?
That's my next question, because obviously the U.S. has enjoyed the privilege,
It's a privilege.
of having the dominant global reserve currency, and that's not something you're going to want to give up. So I don't see the U.S. just saying, all right, sure, go for it. How do you see the U.S. preventing this, reacting to this?
I think it's sticks and carrots with the global South, bribes and threats.
Let's talk about the sticks.
Well, the sticks are,
military action?
they're already, you saw that the U.S. just threatened certain countries, I think the UAE and someone else, about being excluded from G7 markets if they find ways around sanctions. So the U.S. is trying.
Yellen was in South Africa recently, giving the South Africans a warning about sticking with the sanctions.
Yeah, so there will be a lot of those, but the BRICS are a very powerful bloc, and they're about to get bigger. How are you going to stop it? My guess, and the thing we want to prevent, because every time there's been a change of power throughout history, from one dominant power to another, which usually goes with the reserve currency also, there's a conflict. And what we don't want in today's age is a conflict. And I think, like I'm talking about a hot war. And so I'm hoping that at some point they'll reach a consensus. The U.S. has to know it can't remain dominant forever. It can't. The world has changed. It's not 1945 any longer. And so, the U.S. is not the sole global economic power, the sole military power. So there has to be a change, and you would hope they'd do it like they did Bretton Woods, the original one, through consensus. I just worry that we're living in a very fragile geopolitical world right now where that's not going to happen, and that worries me.
Well, Frank, they say the biggest lesson of history is that people don't learn the lessons of history.
Yeah, that's why I read a lot of history.
Yeah. So, look, every reserve currency has a life cycle. I mean, Ray Dalio has obviously spoken about this extensively. But the U.S. is aware that the sunset may be here. Again, I just don't see even this administration, which is perceived, I think it's fair to say, on the global stage as perhaps a weaker administration than prior administrations. I don't see relinquishing this kind of power.
They will try and prevent it. I just don't see how they can in the long run. But they will try and prevent it. Because think of what happens if the U.S. dollar loses its reserve status, its supreme reserve status. What does that mean for interest rates? What does that mean for inflation? What does that mean for servicing U.S. debt?
It's a catastrophe.
To me, it's a national security issue. And so I think it's going to be ugly, whatever happens. But I don't see how they can stop it. And again, I think it has to be carefully worded. The approach by if it's the BRICS, and the BRICS with an expansion, they have to do it in a manner that it's not taking over from the U.S. dollar, it's just an alternative to the U.S. dollar. I still don't think that's going to go over very well, but people have to stop talking about the destruction of the U.S. dollar and replacing the U.S. dollar. It's a substitute.
Well, hence you've used the term bifurcation, as in split, because in your thesis, the dollar is still in play, but just not as powerfully. So who is on Team Dollar?
Europe, Japan, Australia, Canada.
And they would have a vested interest in pushing against this alternative currency as well?
I would think so. We have the North American Trade Agreement here, the NAFTA, and I just think it's really it's the West, which is U.S., Japan, and Europe, Canada, Australia, that sort of collective, and then you got the rest of the world. You have the BRICS and you have the global South, and they all have different needs and agendas.
Right. Well, what could possibly derail this agenda?
A war.
A war between.
I don't.
Are we in that war? Is this Ukraine-Russia war a proxy war?
I think it is
representing.
I think it's a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia.
Yeah,
I do believe that. I mean, the U.S. would not like to portray it that way, but definitely the U.S. is enjoying the idea that they're weakening Russia through attrition. Just keep wearing them down through this war on somebody else's ground, not their own. And Yeah, so which I think is sad because I think that they should find a way to settle this thing and get it over with. But I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Well, it seems like they're upping the ante. I mean, the US and Germany have just sent tanks over to Ukraine. Ukraine is now calling for F-16s.
They're not getting them.
Well, they said they weren't going to get tanks either.
That's
So
true. Yeah, the problem with wars, there are two problems with wars. As you know, I'm co-chair of the International Crisis Group, so that's all we deal with is conflict. Two problems with wars: they're unpredictable and they always escalate before they end. And the combatants only settle when they each think they've reached the most they can reach on the battlefield, the most that they can accomplish on the battlefield, and they can't accomplish any more. Right. That's when they're ready for talks. And I don't think we're there yet with respect to Ukraine and Russia.
If Russia does lose this war, let's put aside the doomsday nuclear war scenario, which I don't think is off the table. Do you?
It's always a possibility. You can't rule it out.
So, but let's hope that a diplomatic resolution is reached, but ultimately Russia emerges as the loser to some degree here. Does this impact this BRICS currency in any way, shape, or form?
It depends who takes over once Putin leaves. But my guess is that it won't be a democratically elected government. I think if Putin's ever replaced or if he passes away or whatever happens to him, I think it'll be just another dictator type there just taking over control, because it's really the way the country is run is, it was always run by Putin and the oligarchs, and it was a deal that they cut amongst themselves, and I don't see how that ends quickly.
So what about discord amongst the BRICS nations themselves? I mean, we're talking about them as though they have this wonderful sense of unity, and perhaps they do in pushing back against the dollar. But for example, India and China have a number of disputes, certainly border disputes, which there's conflict there on occasion that could escalate, especially as they're competing to be a superpower population-wise, GDP-wise.
Yeah, I don't see that being those issues like the border dispute being big enough to overpower the need to come together and have an alternative currency. I think there's just way too much at stake with trade between Russia, China, and India. That the trade, that you have, what is it? Almost 3 billion people there, and I think that's. I don't see those issues like the border issue, which only flares up occasionally. It's not something that is, that's always at play. I just don't see that being important enough to prevent them from coming together with a currency, a trading currency.
What about a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, which a lot in the U.S. military are saying is looking more and more likely?
Yeah, I obviously I read the same things you read, and
we're gonna have to share sources later.
I don't listen. Who knows? Okay, we don't know. I doubt it. I doubt that China, having seen what happened with Russia over Ukraine, is in any rush to invade Taiwan. And I know that a lot of generals are saying, well, they only have a window of this many years and they have to do it before this and that. Those are all, people are speculating. I just don't see China, if it were excluded from the G7 markets through sanctions, that'd be terrible for China. I mean, China is reliant on trade, and I just don't think they would want, they could lose the US, but to lose US and Europe, I don't know. I don't think Taiwan is that important at this moment in time.
So the good news, Frank, that I'm getting from you is you see these trends happening, but you don't necessarily see them as catastrophic as many of the other people that I speak to expect things to play out. Correct me if I'm wrong, you do see the bifurcation of the global monetary system, but that doesn't necessarily mean that my dollar becomes absolutely worthless, or that I am subject to extreme hyperinflation here in the United States. That as a result
all those
of this.
things are possible, Michelle. But the problem is, and again, I look at probabilities, and you weigh each probability. So what's the probability you mentioned earlier, a nuclear war over Ukraine? Yeah, it's possible, but the probability is probably this, because neither side wants it. Okay. And when you talk about a complete meltdown and hyperinflation, absolutely it's probable. But, it's not what I would bet more on a long period of stagflation, no growth, inflationary bursts now and then like we had in the 70s. Yeah, and where things are just not happening and things kind of deteriorate slowly. You know, it's kind of just falls apart slowly as opposed to this Armageddon thing that everybody talks about all the time. Nobody wants Armageddon.
It's a good movie plot, though.
It is. Yeah.
We'll go back to Lionsgate and your background in movies in a minute, but you do see it then happening in a more stable way. You do see the system splitting, but the dollar still maintaining relevance
And value.
Yeah. So you're not...
Unless, and there's another possibility, and would be my hope. I doubt it, but wouldn't it be nice if the U.S. with the rest of the world, the BRICS countries, created a new monetary system where it was all partially backed by gold? Okay, so the U.S. has 8,000 tons or 8,100 tons of gold. They could all conceivably buy more. All you have to do to achieve that is to choose a percentage of backing. Is it a 15%? Is it 40%? And then you do it as a function of M0 money supply, or as a function of GDP, as a function of trade, and you create a mechanism by which your settlement currency has some gold backing. And that way, if the U.S., and I doubt the U.S. would agree to this unless a gun was put to their head, to be part of it, so that there's faith in that currency, because people have lost faith in fiat currencies. But again, I think, with the U.S. still wanting to be the policeman of the world and applying sanctions when they deem it necessary, I just don't see that happening. But it'd be nice if that were the outcome. My guess, it's going to happen without the U.S. approving, and there will be some friction and conflict, and I just hope it doesn't become a global war.
But it's a possibility.
It's always a possibility. Everything's a possibility.
So how are you personally sort of positioning yourself for these ranges of possibilities and probabilities?
Defensive. So, we've gone through a few years of casino mentality. You and I have talked about this, the whole crypto thing and all the craziness, the tech stocks, and I wrote a lot about it in the last few years that, this is just a bubble. It's the biggest bubble ever, and it's a global bubble. It's historical, and it's going to burst, which it did. But it's far from over. A lot of air still has come out of this bubble. And if you check past markets, it doesn't do this. It does this. And so you're going to see some rallies, but I think that there's still a lot of downside in the equities. Okay, a lot. And we're going into a secular bear market. And you have to pick your spot. So for me, it's right now very defensive. It's gold, obviously. Gold is my favorite store of value asset that I know is not going to go to zero. Cash, as much as you might not like cash in inflationary times, right now you can get 3-4% in T-bills. You just buy your T-bills and just sit and wait for something to play out so you have cash to invest. Some equities, not American equities, so international materials producers, the big dividend-paying Rio Tintos and BHPs and Valleys, and the energy stocks that pay dividends. I'm staying away from American stocks. I think they were way overvalued and still have a long way to go. And hard assets in general. I think my philosophy is hard asset skewed, gold being the primary hard asset, but real estate also works. It depends on how much money you've got to manage. You can't have a huge portfolio if you don't have a lot of money. If you have no money, I'm speaking to everybody out there, buy a gold coin, buy a gold coin and buy 2 gold coins, whatever you can afford. And I gave my kids gold coins recently and gave them a long lecture as to why they needed to own gold. And I hope that one coin resonates with them, that it's the importance of having gold in your portfolio. So that's what but I'm playing defense. I think now is not the time to be bold and go out there unless you have a little bit of speculation money for junior gold stocks. Because I think the junior gold stocks are going to have an incredible run, okay? The producers, the developers. I'm not so much into exploration, but they're going to have an incredible run if gold does what I think is good.
Do you have any in particular?
Well, you know me, I build my gold mining companies, and I'm building my 4th one, which is Eris Mining. And, it's only we've been at it a couple of years, and we have, producing 250,000 ounces a year, $85 million free cash flow, 25 million ounces in the ground. pathway to 600,000 ounces a year. I mean, some incredible 2 world-class projects that are being either expanded or going into production. So yeah, so I focus. I don't like to invest in a million different things. And I have a few positions, but that's my main position. And that will be my moneymaker, I hope. That'll be my moneymaker in this gold market. Okay. Whereas my physical gold is just about, I've owned it for over 20 years, never sold an ounce. I've only bought more along the way. And that is what allows me to sleep at night. That will never go away. And in 20 years, it's outperformed the S&P over the last 20 years. And Wall Street doesn't like to talk about that. The media doesn't like to talk about it. Gold has outperformed equities over the last 20 years.
Where do you keep your gold?
I'm going to tell you and a million other people that watch it.
In a vault somewhere, private estate. No? Well, it was worth a shot, Frank. It was worth a shot. Okay.
You're funny. Okay.
Moving on to another one of your, shall we say, forecasts that seem to be materializing at a more and more rapid pace. Mm-hmm. You've written about this a lot and well ahead of the curve on many fronts, although the idea of artificial intelligence and automation has been a threat to the global workforce for a while, but you highlighted the fact that it could be ramping up. And we used to think that certain jobs would be safe. Yeah. Creative types, writing, coding. We thought, okay, the robots are going to assemble things, they'll pick the fruit, they'll, put the line and the assembly line together.
Process your legal stuff.
Stuff like that. Drive the cars, delivery, things like that.
Be your doctor.
Well, now with ChatGPT and artificial intelligence becoming more and more sophisticated, copywriters are having their jobs in jeopardy. Writers are having their jobs in jeopardy. Coders, even artists. Artificial intelligence can put together some beautiful artwork.
I know, and I've seen some. Okay, so my son sent this to me. He's way ahead of me on this stuff. And now there's a conversation about university exams, and that people can run all of their questions through this AI and get perfect answers.
Yeah, in fact, GPT has passed the medical licensing exam, a law school exam, a Wharton MBA exam.
And has written songs. Yeah. It's written songs, which blew me away, because I used to write songs. I wrote songs for 7 years, had a music studio, and there's a lot of work that goes into writing a song. And now you get an AI thing that can do it for you.
I'll tell you this, Frank. Earlier today, I actually chatted to my producer, Cornelius, and I said to him, let's ask ChatGPT to write a song for Frank Giustra.
And did it?
The system was down.
Oh, really?
It's overloaded. Everybody, but I would have liked to have GPT write a song for you and pretend I wrote it and see if you could tell the difference. But this is the idea, is that even creative parts of the economy are now at risk.
Which is kind of scary.
It's terrifying.
It's terrifying in the sense that, where does that leave, 8 billion people, soon to be 9 billion people? If in the next, let's say, 30, 50 years, AI can do everything. AI and robotics can do everything, including, there's no job that it can't do. Where does that leave society? I think it creates a bifurcation of society. The haves and the have-nots, that, it's basically something that looks like 1984. I don't know. It's hard to predict these things, but it is a scary thing, and I don't think, because it's such a competitive world, and you've got China competing with America over who's going to dominate in AI and who's going to dominate in quantum computing, quantum communications, and they're not going to cooperate to find a way. I know that Elon Musk and this guy named Max Tegmark started this institute to find ways how to apply AI in a responsible manner so the society's not hurt. But if you've got competing countries trying to dominate, I don't know how you're going to reach some sort of consensus of how to do this properly. I don't know. At my age, I worry about my kids. My kids are going into, fields that AI could dominate in.
Well, at least they have their gold to look for, too.
Their gold coin.
You won't tell us
all they're getting is a gold coin.
Oh, well, the rest of it, then you won't tell us where you've hid. But,
yeah, so it is.
But jokes aside, this is a very serious trend, and you do talk about the bifurcation of the workforce, but also the bifurcation of society. Yeah. What would it mean for the mining industry, for example? How do you see AI sort of factoring into that? We'll keep it close to home before we expand.
Yeah, I don't know. AI and automation combined could replace an entire workforce. You know, if you're mining a vein, the AI could, more intelligently predict, which way to go and how to mine in the most efficient manner with the least waste. I mean, again, that to me, that's one that could easily be replaced by AI. There are other types of jobs that are a little bit more complicated, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't have the answer. I just flag the problem.
But it's a very big problem. So should we be doing something to prevent it, or is the horse out of the barn? It's too late now?
Well, I just think because of the China-U.S. relations, it's going to be hard to control, to come to some sort of an agreement how to do this in a responsible manner, because they're both competing for supremacy in AI and quantum computing. And whoever reaches supremacy first has a real upper hand over the rest on all sorts of things.
And again, the rate of change has been accelerating very, very dramatically. I'm going to put together the scenario for you, Frank, and have you weigh in on this idea. Mm-hmm. So we've got artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. We've got this global monetary reset. Mm-hmm. We have people who are now out of jobs, not necessarily tomorrow, but a little bit further in the future. And then some suggest, okay, well, we're going to have to bring in universal basic income. Mm-hmm. And we bring that in the form of a CBDC, a central bank digital currency.
I knew where you were heading.
Oh, yeah?
It's all going to end up with a CBDC. Yes.
And then people are desperate and more willing to accept it, as well as all of the control that comes with a CBDC. Mm-hmm. And there we have these two dystopian scenarios kind of merging together.
Yeah, I know. It's a possibility. It is a possibility, and it's scary as hell.
I get chills just talking about it.
I mean, you think about it. Think about what's it called? What China has, a social
credit system.
Credit system. I mean, if governments, using AI and surveillance and implemented that around and had access to your bank account, could either punish you or reward you for your behavior through the central bank digital currencies, what a scary world that would be.
But doesn't this AI replacing jobs accelerate that trend when people are now finding themselves in that bifurcation of society, more and more dependent on government?
That's a good observation. Yes, it does accelerate it. And you know what? And by the way, these digital currencies are going to happen. There's over 100 countries already testing, pilot testing, experimenting, including the U.S. Mm-hmm. We're going in that direction. And they'll do it claiming that it's more efficient and blah, blah, blah. But in the end, government will have more control over its population. They will obviously spin it in a fashion that says, well, this is good for you. Because now we can more efficiently, manage the monetary system and the economy, fine tune it. But at the end of the day, it's control. Right. And governments are controlled by politicians, and politicians have their own agendas, and it's all about power, and so I don't trust governments to do that sort of thing.
Does the CBDC scare Frank Giustra?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at my age, I'm not worried about it, but you should be.
Well,
by the time it all gets implemented and changes society.
What is the time horizon then?
I don't know. I think at the most a decade.
Well, you're going to be around in the next decade.
Yeah, I know, but you know what I'm saying.
You're in good shape.
I'm worried about my kids, is what I'm saying.
You're eating healthy with good Dominica olive oil.
I'll be here. Yeah, I'll be around for a long time.
So in a decade, you're thinking in a decade, we're going to have central bank digital currencies.
We could easily. Yeah. I mean, they're moving quickly.
What can be done to stop this, prevent this, delay this?
I don't know.
When we have people like you, global philanthropists, world leaders, titans of industry, connected to a lot of influential people, I would think, seeing this trend, finding this trend problematic, do you just sit back and go, this is terrible, but I can't do anything about it?
See, someone with opinions like mine or yours, the things we're discussing now, don't have a strong enough voice in the bureaucracy of government. It's too powerful a force. I just don't see how individuals like us, we think outside the box. We're not mainstream thinkers. I don't consider myself a mainstream thinker. I've always thought of things that the mainstream doesn't want to discuss. It's either inconvenient or it's against their own interests. So I honestly, my philosophy on life is you do the best you can to help as many people as possible, as my philanthropic side, knowing that you can't change the overall arc of history as it will unfold. You can't not change it. It will unfold because we are all human and we do the same things over and over throughout the centuries. The same mistakes, same patterns. It's comical. We never seem to learn from those mistakes. So I see where we're heading, and power is a powerful force, and people that have power want more of it.
Well, Frank, I'm flattered that you put me in the same category as people
you
as
asked the
yourself.
question.
But with all due respect to myself, I do not have your influence, your financial might, your connections. Why not try and galvanize some kind of movement, even a lobbying movement, even playing by the rules of DC and politics against this kind of trend, rather than I'm getting Frank Giustra to be the superhero against CBDCs.
Listen, you make it sound easy.
I'm not saying it's easy at all.
And it would be a full-time job for somebody. And you already, like I said, Elon Musk and a couple of others, including this Max Tegmark, who came up with the idea, created this institute to do exactly that, to prevent things like AI overwhelming society in a damaging way. The central bank digital currency, that's a runaway train. That's a runaway train. Who's going to stop? You're going to tell government? You're going to tell the U.S. government, listen, you shouldn't do this because this will give you more control over the people. They're going to listen.
So it's inevitable. Really unstoppable.
I think it's heading in that direction. I don't think there's much you can do to stop it, except protect your personal wealth.
And that goes back to gold. How do we do that?
Gold is one way to do it. I mean, diversification, geographical diversification. Americans have a funny way of investing only in America. That's not the way you should look at your investment portfolio. You should have assets that are in different parts of the world. And I think different asset classes. That's all you can do, and hope for the best.
When governments say, no, we'll use this responsibly, we're not going to
of course they'll say that.
Monitor people. What is the scenario in your mind that you do see this realistically playing out in a decade? Like how do you see governments using those levers of power?
Well, it depends what happens. If we get through this decade unscathed with a financial disaster like 2008 or worse, which is still a possibility.
Yeah.
I mean, an accident can happen at any time. Black swan events are called that because, by definition, you can't predict them. They just happen, and there's so much lurking in the shadows of derivatives and debt, and that we have no idea what's going on until something breaks. So, if something were to break, which would cause a catastrophe, a financial catastrophe, that would bring on a recession, or there was some national security issue like the invasion of Taiwan and then conflict with China, those things will give government the opportunity to move things a little bit faster and the excuse to do it.
So let's say, for example, a de-dollarization trend that leads to the bifurcation of the global monetary system, combined with some kind of conflict to try and prevent it, combined with artificial intelligence making half the population unemployable.
You're very
there's
gloomy.
Your scenario.
You're very gloomy. Yeah, that could happen. There's a possibility that would happen. I'm just hoping that it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm with you, Frank. I certainly hope that it doesn't.
You're looking for answers that don't exist. And, we live in a world, and it's a competitive world, and it's ugly, and it's mean. And we've made these mistakes before in the world. And I don't know what you do. All you can tell us two and your viewers are not going to solve this problem. Okay, all you can do is protect yourself and your family. That's all you can do, because the things will unfold as they will.
Is that buying a farm?
I buy a farm. Yeah, absolutely.
How does one invest in a farm?
Very carefully. I've owned.
You have some good land out in Italy.
Yeah, I've owned other farms, and I've tried other type of farming. That's a tough gig. Farming is really, really tough. Mother Nature is not very cooperative at times. So.
All right. Well, we're going to take the conversation away from problems of this world to perhaps problems of another world, the universe at large, if you will. And I want to talk about the Quantum Gravity Institute, which in fact delves into a number of areas, including the ideas of multiple dimensions, various worlds in the universe coexisting. Maybe my idea is I get a portal and I move into a whole other universe here. But seriously, tell us about what the Quantum Gravity Institute is and what your involvement is in that.
Okay. I'll try and summarize it, just because I could, this could take hours. There are two perfect theories. Einstein's theory of general relativity, which deals with space, time, and gravity. Okay, a perfect theory. Been proven time and time again, and it's the reason we can have space travel, atomic clocks, and our GPS system. If we didn't have an understanding of general relativity, we wouldn't have those things. It also gives us an understanding of how the cosmos work. It predicted black holes and the Big Bang, all things that Einstein predicted, a century ago. Okay, so that's general relativity. Then you have quantum mechanics. It deals with light and matter at the subatomic level and the behavior of light and matter at the subatomic level. And more importantly than general relativity, our understanding of quantum mechanics since the 1920s has given us semiconductors, microchips, computers, communications equipment, medicine, agriculture, everything that modern society is based on today wouldn't function without our knowledge of quantum mechanics and how we manipulate the principles of quantum mechanics being superposition and entanglement. Those understanding how those work mathematically has allowed us to create all of this technology. We would be living in a 19th century industrial society if it weren't for quantum mechanics. It's as simple as that. Two perfect theories have never failed. One small problem: they're incompatible and often contradictory. They contradict each other. They deal with two separate things in our overall reality, but they contradict each other. And no one has figured out unifying these two principles of quantum gravity, of general relativity and quantum mechanics is what we refer to as quantum gravity, a theory of quantum gravity. If we can find a way to get there, that would change our world beyond imagination. Just like if we were sitting here in 1920 and I was going to tell you that quantum mechanics was going to give us all of this technology that I just described, computers, that you could have in your palm access to all human knowledge, all these things, you'd think I was crazy. So what will happen if we ever get a theory of quantum gravity? It will change everything in ways we can't possibly manage it. Time travel. People think it's impossible. Well, it actually is possible. We just need to understand quantum gravity first. Endless sources of clean energy, fusion. All these things can be advanced with a knowledge of quantum gravity. So what are we doing? Quantum Gravity Institute, that's different than everybody else. Our unique approach is that we're only going to look at those theories, because there are a number of theories of quantum gravity out there, but only look at those theories that can be tested through observation or through experiment. And I'll tell you what that means. Take superstring theory, which has been the most elegant theory that unifies quantum and gravity. Mathematically beautiful. There's only one problem. To test it, you would need a particle accelerator the size of the galaxy to test, because the strings in superstrings are 100 million billion times smaller than the protons that they smash in these colliders, like the one in Geneva. So that theory, beautiful as it is, cannot be tested. There are other theories. We're looking at two that can be conducted in labs that are already advanced, where we need to work on the theory a little bit further. So we're bringing some of the greatest minds in the world to Vancouver on a regular basis. That's the objective of the Institute, where they can sit together and work with the experimentalists and refine these theories so that these experiments can be carried out and give us an answer. That's the essence of Quantum Gravity Institute.
That is a very complex proposition that you're trying to solve there. What would happen if you do link those two theories together?
Well, the things we don't know. Just like we didn't know back then what quantum mechanics would give us. So Kip Thorne, who won the Nobel Physics Prize, who came to our conference this last year, and it was part of one of the experiments we're looking at, and who wrote Interstellar. the movie Interstellar. It was Kip Thorne. He's a theoretical physicist. And he basically thinks that if we figure it out, they could allow us to time travel. Wouldn't that be cool?
What would you do if you could time travel? Let's assume you were successful.
I want to
with
go
your
back to the
institute.
Roman Empire. There's a few questions I have about, what's been written about the Roman Empire. I'd like to see it firsthand. Although it's more difficult to go into the past than it is to go in the future. So
Oh, really?
Yeah,
According
it is.
to the
Yeah,
laws
because-
of time travel?
yeah, according to the laws of time travel, because basically, theoretically, you go back and shoot your grandmother, and then you wouldn't be born. You wouldn't be able to go back to shoot your grandmother.
Butterfly effect.
No, it's not about it. It's the sequence of events through time.
Right.
If you
This
change,
is giving me like Back to the Future kind of memories, right?
Yeah,
The
great
movie
movie,
Back
yeah,
to the
yeah.
Future. If you do this, then you weren't born, then that doesn't happen.
yeah, exactly.
But you would go back to the Roman Empire?
I would, yeah. I think that is the most fascinating for me, in terms of historical times. I'm just fascinated. I collect, I collect ancient gold coins, and I'm just fascinated by the Roman Empire.
Well, as Einstein says, the distinction between the past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion.
That is correct.
And you're working at perhaps
Well,
unraveling that illusion.
listen. If all we do over my lifetime is because who knows when we'll come up with a theory? I mean, you just don't know. But if all we do is advance the theory and eliminate possibilities, then you just start to zero in. If that's impossible, that doesn't work, then you start to zero in on where does the answer lie?
What do you think is the most likely answer in terms of various dimensions?
I'm not a physicist. I never studied it in school. I've only read tons of books on it recently. But the people I work with, Sir Roger Penrose, who won the Nobel Peace Prize, Philip Stamp, who's a very well-known physicist here in Vancouver, they believe that quantum will break down at scale. That at certain scale, quantum breaks down, and quantum only works at smaller scales. It does not. It's not applicable to larger scales. So that would be one step towards a theory.
All right, but we will have to see how that one unravels. Now, you mentioned Interstellar,
Yes.
which was not produced by Lionsgate,
No.
but does bring me into the Lionsgate conversation, because when I say Frank Giustra, the name recognition pops and I go, founder of Lionsgate. And they're like, oh, yeah, of course. For those of us that don't know your background, tell us how you went from mining and gold into film.
I'd been dabbling in film since 1986, while I was still running Yorkton, the investment bank that I ran until 1996. So 10 years before, I founded Lionsgate in 97. 11 years before that, I started dabbling. I created a small company in Hollywood called the International Movie Group. Big name. And we started by selling English-speaking films into the foreign markets and financing films by selling the rights to countries. It was a financing structure that worked very well at that time. Pre-selling, different territories, get the money, make the film, deliver the film. And then we got into producing, making our own films. So we made a bunch of films in the late 80s, early 90s. And I traveled all over the world with this fellow that I was working with, who was much older than I was, and he was actually former executive from a studio, and I learned the business. And I learned just enough to be dangerous. And so when I launched Lionsgate in 1990, when I left, I retired from the investment banking business in 96 with no idea as to what I was going to do. I just wanted out. I didn't want to do it anymore. I was tired of it, hated the business. And then 3 or 4 months later, I thought, I got to do something. And why don't I start a studio? And that's how it started. And it was hard. It was not easy. It was really hard.
Do you have a favorite project from your time with Lionsgate?
Well, I only stayed 6 years before I left to start creating gold mining companies, which I started doing in 2001. But I left as chairman in 2003. They asked me back in 2010 when they were, Carl Icahn was trying to do a proxy fight with them. And so they brought me back on. I stayed for 5 more years and left in 2015. So my early, I left the year that Crash won the Best Picture. That's the year, 2003, Crash, the movie, I don't know if you ever saw it, won Best Picture. That was Lionsgate. But my favorites were the early ones, like American Psycho with
Christian Bale.
Christian Bale.
Yeah, great movie. Was he dreaming it, or did it really happen?
I think he was dreaming it. That's what I would like to believe, because otherwise he's a horrific character.
It's a kind of ending leaves you in suspense.
Yeah, but wasn't he
really
amazing in that?
Fantastic,
And he's one of my favorite male actors. Like I've got a handful of that I think are great, and he's one of them.
So you would say American Psycho was probably one of your
One of them,
favorite
and then Crash, Monsters Ball, which won Halle Berry Best Supporting Actress. Incredible movie. So when we launched Lionsgate in the late 90s, we focused on the non-mainstream, non-studio, kind of edgy movies that nobody else would do.
Okay.
Dogma. I don't know if you ever saw Dogma with Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Chris Rock, Salma Hayek.
Don't think I've seen that
It
one.
made kind of fun of the Catholic Church. And so we picked that up when Miramax was sold to Disney, and Harvey Weinstein at that time, Disney was being boycotted by the Catholic Church, and they threatened to boycott all the theme parks. So they said, we can't. So they gave it to us, and we put that one out, and an incredible movie, did really well for us. But then, after I left, they got into the bigger and bigger movies. Hunger Games, those 4 movies made them a fortune, and they've made many, many others since.
I have to return some videotapes. That was the line. That was the line from American Psycho. With his excuse for getting out of everything. He was like, I have to go return some videotapes.
You have a good memory.
I do not have to return any videotapes. I still have more time with you, which I'm going to milk to ask you a couple of personal questions now, Frank, if I may. You're obviously a very successful, driven, creative person. What would you say has been the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Best piece of advice? Yeah, leave your ego at the door when you're doing business. Because that got me into trouble a few times. And it took me a while to learn that ego has no place in business decisions. And a lot of people make decisions in business, and it's about their ego. It's about demonstrating, their intelligence or, whatever it is they're trying to prove their power. And I learned, someone told me that, and I took it to heart, and, that was it.
Leave your ego
at the door when you're doing a business deal.
Well, that kind of segues into conflict, because you're part of the International Crisis Group. Yeah. And ego, I guess, is a big part of conflict. So what would you say are some good personal conflict resolution tips?
As in your own? Oh my God, we're really getting into it.
You deal with crises, you deal with conflict. Yeah. You said check the ego at the door. I'm assuming that would translate well into personal relationships as well.
100%.
But what would you say are some good ways to avoid conflict or handle conflict?
This is good. There's a book called The Four Agreements. Have you read it? If you haven't, read it. Okay, and basically, you can read it in an afternoon. It's not I read it many years ago. It was given to me by someone who said I was going through a difficult personal time at the time, and they saw that I was in this kind of funk. And this person, very well-known person, gives me this book and said, read this, it will change your life, and it changed mine. That's all he said. And I said, okay. So I read it, and it changed my life. And one of the rules, there are 4 agreements to living a good life. Always do your best. Never take anything personal, and don't assume anything. And be impeccable with your word. Okay. If you live by those things, you will have a very peaceful life. The one that, in terms of conflict, that I really hadn't thought about, never take anything personal. Mm-hmm. The minute you understand that by taking things personal, all you're doing is gratifying somebody else's insecurities, that it occupies your mind space with negative thoughts because you're noodling all this stuff and getting upset and angry, and 90% of the thoughts you think on one day, you're thinking about the next day. So you're just occupying your mind. So the minute I let go of that if I heard somebody say something about me, for instance, I would say, in my mind, I would say, I forgive them and I let it go, and don't think about it any longer. And I tell you, that's the best way to avoid that trap of getting angry at people and wanting to take some form of revenge, however when people attack you, you want to attack back, that whole human nature thing. And I think that, just let it go. They're saying those things, it's not about you, it's about them. They're saying because their own insecurities, and by saying those things to attack you, they're making themselves feel better about themselves. That's the fundamental part of it. And as soon as you accept that it's never about you, it's about their own stuff, life gets easier.
All right. Let it go.
Let it go.
As they say in that Frozen Disney movie. We'll quote Disney
I never
to
saw
wrap
it.
it up.
It's one of the
Let
ones.
it go and shake it off, quoting Taylor Swift. And we quoted Einstein as well. So we've covered the
We
gambit.
covered it, yeah. We did pretty good.
Frank, thank you so much.
All
It's
right.
been a fabulous conversation, and I look forward to cooking with you next time because your olive oil has made even my cooking palatable.
Awesome.
So we'll
All
do
right.
this again soon.
Okay,
Thank you,
talk
Frank.
soon. Bye.